So excited to be here to have this informal dialogue with all of you. I am a scholar practitioner and consultant, and my expertise in scholarship focuses on creating and developing identity-affirming spaces in organizations to assist with retention, to assist with belonging, and creating points of connection to other parts of an organization. So really thinking about this in a non-deficit focused way. Also have been doing a little bit of work with folks in developing strategy to recruit and retain people of color at elite, predominantly white institutions to organizations for employment, as well as to assist with the development of diversity and inclusion frameworks as well. So you said a little bit about my journey. I am by practice an administrator, I'm an educator, but really interested in marrying this idea of being a practitioner with the academic piece. So taking the theory and things that I've learned in the classroom and that I'm seeing in an academic environment, but really putting that into practice. And so I really take my experiences navigating academia, navigating the workplace as a Black woman, and how that has really shaped my journey and has really shaped strategies that I've used to navigate to get to where I am right now. Just broadly about my journey, I'm from Southern California originally. I moved around a lot as a child in Southern California. So now that I'm an adult and in practice, I feel like that has really helped me be able to navigate. I'm used to growing up, I went to an all-Black school. I went to a predominantly Latinx school. I went to a predominantly white school, and then a school with everyone. And so as I look at how that's shaped me now, I'm comfortable being able to establish relationships with anyone. And because I had to do that so much growing up, that you can throw me in a room and I'm able to form points of connection. I've had a lot of mentors along my journey that have helped, mentors, friends, colleagues that really have helped me just shape my practice, and then also really broaden my perspective of thinking about how I can utilize my expertise and my skills, not just in academia, but in other industries, and how do I connect all of the dots. And so right now, currently, I am really making an effort to separate myself from my organization and really focus on branding myself with my skills, with my expertise, and really thinking about what does that look like to brand myself and also to monetize my experiences, my skills, and what I bring. And I know Dr. Fowles, Dr. Davis specifically have heard me talk about this a lot, and I've learned a lot from both of them on what does that look like, what does that journey look like for me now. Especially for me because it hasn't been natural. I did not attend business school. I don't have many entrepreneurs in my family. And so on this journey, I'm learning as I go. And again, learning that it's important for me to separate myself from my institution, but really to focus on branding myself. And I'll stop there.
Awesome. All right, and Dr. Davis, tell us a little bit about yourself and all the excellent things that you're doing.
Well, I often describe myself as a business practitioner with a passion for transforming the education sector. And what that simply means is that I come from the business world. I have over, I would say, 15 years of experience. So speaking to what Dr. Roz mentioned about rebranding myself, upon coming from the business sector, I worked in a variety of professional services firms, Merrill Lynch, Deloitte, et cetera. And what I learned was that while I am able to make change in that sector by hiring top talent, where I was challenged was that I felt as if many folks that look like us were not afforded the same opportunities to get into those senior level positions. So I said, how do I prepare them so that their entrance into the workforce is correct? One of the things that I did was I created an organization called the Etiquette Academy, which merges workforce readiness with some of those character skills that a lot of our students sometimes lack, those social skills, so that they can quickly transfer into the workforce. The second thing that I did was I created an organization called Workforce EQI, which is an emergence of workforce readiness with emotional intelligence. And so by even developing those organizations, I felt as if I was not astute or credible in the space. I don't come from the education sector. So me stepping into this space, I am a novice. So I felt as if in order for me to have that credibility, it was important for me to go back and obtain a higher level of education. So I gathered my MBA from the University of Illinois, Champaign-Urbana, undergrad, MBA, and then my doctorate at the University of Southern California.
So how would you define intersectionality? And also, how do you see this definition of intersectionality play within your professional networks?
Yeah, I could start. As I think about intersectionality, I know again, with me primarily being in higher education, we really look at Kimberly Crenshaw's definition of intersectionality, and it's really about a lens, right? So a lens and understanding how different forms or barriers and problems and how they can impact multiple parts of a person's identity at one time. And so as I think of it that way, for myself, I think of my identities that are very salient to me, that go beyond the protected identities or social identities. So of course, for me, race is very salient, gender, but also my identity as an educator, as a diversity and inclusion practitioner are very, very salient. They're important. So as I think about barriers and things that may arise, those are the identities that I think about that may be impacted. As I think about my network, the identities that I mentioned, I have those intersectional identity networks that are attached to those. So one is Jenga, and Dr. Davis will be able to fill in as well. But I received my doctorate from USC. Airies and I were actually in the same cohort, so that's how we originally met. And we're co-founders along with 7 other women of an organization focused on pretty much finishing the doctoral program at USC. And through that professional network, we all have the common identities of being Black and being women. But now that we've matriculated, we're done with that program, we are also using that network for upward mobility in terms of different job situations, consulting, other scholarships. So that's one network that I feel like intersects with multiple identities that I think about. Another big one for me are my alumni networks. So I'm an alum of the University of Nevada, Las Vegas, so UNLV. I attended there for my bachelor's and master's degree, and then again, USC for my doctorate. And so those networks are very important to me because that's where I'm getting a lot of my mentorship, informal and formal, job leads, conference presentation opportunities, consulting gigs. That's where my network is. And those networks, everyone doesn't look like me. They may, be different ethnicities. They may be different sexual orientations, gender. But again, those networks are my professional networks, and I get what I need from both of them.
Well, I won't repeat much of what Dr. Ross say, but I would echo her sentiments. What I would add is I think it's like a coalescence of what it is that you want to do coupled with what it is that you have to do, and I'll explain. Many of us want to be fill in the blank. However, a lot of times we don't have the resources or the access to the resources. So the intersectionality to me means how do you go about obtaining access to resources in order to support you as you decide what it is that you ultimately want to do. One of the things that I would offer as an opportunity for those that are launching an affinity group is to understand that those that are in that group may not necessarily look like you. It is about you bringing in like-minded individuals in the sense that they are looking for similar objectives, but sometimes, again, they may not look like you, and that's okay because you have to think about the thought perspective of diverse minds and bringing in ideas that may be a little unorthodox. And I think that helps to bring in that common thread in terms of the building of that type of group, the affinity groups. One of the things that I also learned is that you have to make people feel uncomfortable. And what that means is that you say that you want to change the world or transform the world by helping support doctoral students towards persistence of graduation, but you don't allow them to be vulnerable in that space. Because as you go through any process, no matter what affinity group you decide to create or you're thinking about, you have a level of vulnerability because you're uncomfortable. You're going through, in most cases, a pretty big feat. And it is important for you, again, to be uncomfortable, to note that you're bringing together diverse perspectives who may not look like you. And I would say, finally, thirdly, you're also being again, purposeful with the use of the resources that you have. So for example, you're not just diving right into it and making this magic happen, but you're thinking about who do you have around you to support you. A lot of times the university professionals are there for the purposes of bringing forth your vision. So you have to surround yourself with individuals who can support that vision. And that means, again, being uncomfortable. That means going to the dean of your school and expressing the fact that you are interested in developing this group and what it means to the school. So those would be the three areas that I would say helps to support building and bringing together an affinity group.
In thinking about that, I think something that's super basic is just like listening to what the group needs. I mean, folks in the group may want other things. They may be looking for mentorship. They may want social space. They want, there may be an opportunity to develop a leadership pipeline in that group. So really creating different ways to gather data to see what it is that the folks want to see, and then regularly gather that data to see if the purpose of the group is really, what it's supposed to be doing. I also think, just again, this is connected to my expertise and practice, is that there's value in all types of affinity groups, but there's specific value in having identity specific and affirming spaces. So, and I know some folks feel a certain type of way of having, an all Black or an all Latinx or an all LGBTQ plus space, but I feel like those are definitely needed. And also space where everyone can come together and talk about company culture and talk about, current events that may be impacting folks' identity. But I'm the proponent of we need both. We don't need either or, because for me, there's value in me being able to go to an all Black space and to talk in a room with my colleagues. Because for me, knowing that, there's a lot of conversation now about being authentic in your, whatever you're doing in your workspace. But the reality is I'm not able to do that all the time. So there's value for me to come into a room and really be able to just breathe and just not have to feel like I have to speak a certain type of way or look a certain type of way, but really be in community with someone else and not have to worry about someone else being there and me having to put on a front. So for me, I really, again, go back to those identity affirming spaces for underrepresented folks and organizations. They're essential, and really reframing it of it's non-deficit focus, but there's value in those spaces. There is value in leveraging individuals' cultural capital that's in that space that can benefit the organization. But again, I think it's important that the organization supports these groups, and really there has to be buy-in too from executive leadership in order for these groups to sustain themselves.
I was listening to a workshop recently. I often listen to several workshops, and many of them speak to the need to put yourself available and be willing to do things for free. A lot of times those opportunities that are free are the ones that afford you the best learning, to me. However, to specifically answer your question about how do you monetize that, because I did those things for free, people saw that value in the competencies that I brought to the table, and in turn, they offered or monetized my participation in their group. So because of that, I then was able to put a dollar amount on there. So how I determined what that dollar amount was, I actually did research based on individuals who were doing something very similar to what it is that I do, which is education consulting, specifically more in the business or around business notations, such as organizational change management and talent development and those types of things. So I looked at what others were doing, and then I put a dollar amount on it, and then I negotiated. Now, this is a piece that I probably am considered probably the negotiating queen by most of my peers, family, etc. Everybody comes to me when they're looking to change jobs or to go through a negotiation process. So you negotiate. So even if you have that fee at the top of your head, add at least 10% above it, and then add maybe an additional squidget on top of that. And then the worst thing they could do is say no. And then at that point, you can negotiate to the point that you originally started. So negotiation is also important.
Mm-hmm. And I'll just add, I'm learning so much again from Dr. Davis. You're giving out your expertise because, you really want to help and you really want, to help your fellow colleagues. But Dr. Davis was the one that was like, you need to monetize it. And so I think for me, that was a complete change in framework, because I've been presenting at conferences for years, international conferences, and that essentially is for free, because more often than not, you have to actually pay to go to the conference. Yeah. Right? Cover your registration, you may get a small speaker's fee, but me really taking what I'm learning from those around me and conference presentations, or even things that I'm doing in my place of work, I'm consulting with other faculty. I'm workshops for free, right? And so for me, it's really inventorying what am I doing, and how can I now present that in a way that I can earn some income off of it and feel okay about it. Like it's fine. It's okay that I'm charging for my time. But again, for me, that's been a mindset change.
When you add value to who you are and what you're presenting, people expect you to charge. So if you go in with the mindset of this is the amount that I charge, 9 times out of 10, they're going to expect that going forward. And then you create almost a following, an expectation, if you will, that is the expectation when they look to hire or bring you on board. So while it's okay to start off having exploratory opportunities and going to these conferences and things like that for free, get to a point where you can have additional conversations, sidebar conversations with the folks that are there and say, you know what? This may be free. However, this is the service and the packages that I offer, and have branding in terms of your website and marketing available as well. That's the only thing I would add to that.
Awesome. I think one thing that I was interested in finding out is if there's an affinity group that's already in place, but there's new people or new energy that enters the group. How does that? How do you go about rebranding, or sometimes you outgrow a group, right? So how do affinity groups change and grow as new people enter it? How do you manage that process, would you say?
People will become involved with your affinity groups because they feel as if sometimes there's something they can get from it, either a notch on their resume, or some type of credibility by being attached to your name or your group. When in actuality, they're taking from you and not putting back in. The accountability piece was critical for us to make that transition or change. Putting yourself out there, making yourself visible, business case, education, otherwise, is just as critical as just being a part of these affinity groups. And Roz, I know you just came back on, so I want to make sure you have some time to chat about that.
I think going off of the visibility piece, for me, again, thinking about my networks, where I presently work, another strong partnership that I had is with my dissertation chair. And that was a mentorship piece, you know, really, again, sharing with her what I wanted to do professionally. And that's an important piece, really sharing with all of your networks what it is you want to do. I know a lot of times, I know for myself, I don't like to talk about myself. I don't like to really, you know, oh, I'm an expert in XYZ, but you have to get comfortable with that. And so my dissertation advisor, dissertation chair was someone that I was really comfortable with because she had been with me on this journey of getting this doctorate. And so I shared with her, you know, I want to teach in the classroom. I want to do this. I want to do some consulting. I want to work with other folks outside of higher education. And she started throwing things my way. She's like, hey, this is a book chapter proposal that matches, you know, what you want to do. Submit this proposal. I did, and now I submitted that book chapter, and I'm waiting for it to be reviewed. She tapped me to teach a diversity and inclusion course last fall. Was terrified, didn't know how it was going to fit into my schedule, but it worked. And so that worked, though, because I shared with her what I wanted to do and what my next steps were in my career. So for me, that's a prime example. She does not look like me. She's not a Black woman. She is another woman of color. But again, really expanding networks as we think of our intersecting identities.
Awesome. We have one more question before we open it up to our guests for their own questions. And we'll start off with you, Dr. Ross, for this question. And the question is, what structures do you think solidify affinity groups, especially for young professionals, you know, where the leadership is often peer-to-peer? Sometimes the groups are organic in nature. Everybody is coming together just for some fun or for some social pieces, right? So what are some structures that really solidify an affinity group to make it productive or engaging to take it to that next level?
Oh gosh, there's so much, especially with new affinity groups. I mean, I think you really do have to set some sort of plan. Again, to think about. For us, I think being in higher education, in our space, it was a little easier because we're able to work off of like an academic calendar. And so we can break it up a little easier into, okay, this is what we want to accomplish for the fall. This is what we want to accomplish for the spring. These are the people that, you know, you need to do this to get funding to do this. You need to do this, talk to this person in order for things to happen. So I think for us being in higher education, we have a little more structure in place. We had to have bylaws. We had to have things very much laid out, which again forced us to. It's not just a social space, but we're getting business done in this organization. But I think it also helps to have opportunities for multiple individuals to lead. So some sort of rotating leadership, again, offers fresh perspectives. It offers other opportunities for folks to lead because our lenses are all different. With Dr. Davis, again, having that business background, with me having, you know, specifically in higher education, in academia, like our perspectives are different, but again, really helps to develop the organization. I think also having involvement from other individuals, whether in higher ed or you're thinking industry, whether that's senior level executives or C-suite folks, or for us, thinking about upper level administration. If there's any way that you can get involvement from them, they're going to help you elevate that organization and put you in spaces and put you in rooms where it's going to help to sustain the organization and give it credibility.
And for you, Dr. Davis, very similar question, but what are the structures that keep a affinity group strong in a corporate setting? I know that as you know, as people leave jobs and get new jobs or get new positions within corporate structures, you know, affinity groups can change. So from a corporate perspective, what value do affinity groups have, and how do they maintain their strength?
The reality is, if you don't have the buy-in from the C-suite or the CEO or the president or someone who is in leadership, it is very difficult to retain and continue within the same type of momentum that you may have had. So I know a lot of organizations have chief diversity officers within the corporate sector. Even in education, for example, I am a professor at Dominican University, Brennan Business School, and we have a chief diversity officer. Similarly, when I was at Deloitte and some of those places, we had chief diversity officers. But here's the issue. The chief diversity officer's job is not to push forward the agenda of diversity. That's a misnomer. The reality is their job is to help push forward the ideas that the C-suite person has put in place so that it is blanketed over everyone. They're more or less responsible for the implementation, the pushing forward, to getting the information out. But if it does not come from the top, it's hard for it to maintain that level of sustainability. So how do you do that when your leadership doesn't have any buy-in? You, in essence, have to make it, you have to make a business case as to the importance of why this type of offering is important. And I often say, if it doesn't make money, it does not make sense. So for those that are in the business world, if you cannot quantify it some shape, form, fashion, in most cases, they are not paying attention. So if you, again, have that flux, add something that quantifies it. Do your research, put together a quantitative study, something, so that you can put numbers attached to it, and then you can go back and put that in front of those key decision makers and let them be the voice that tells folks that this is important and this is why. Finally, I would say it has to be embedded in the culture. A lot of times when I go through the process of looking at job opportunities or consulting engagements even, I look at the website to see if they're practicing what they preach. Not necessarily if they see like a stagnant picture that looks like someone that looks like me, but what are they doing in the community to support people of color? What are they doing to support the LGBTQ community? What are they doing to support those that have, it's another term that I just learned, fudge, I'll have to get back to you guys on it, but it was about supporting those that have a level of disability that is attached to their learning. Like, what are you doing to help those individuals? Then I believe that their value and mission statement is attached to their diversity intent. And that's when you can make change. And that's when you can come in and say, although it may not be where it needs to be, these are the things that I see you're doing that I can help support.
Well, I know that I'm up here taking notes, and I know some of our guests have been trying to wrap their hands around all the things that we've talked about today. So we want to make sure that we stay on time and on schedule. So we want to thank Dr. Ross and Dr. Airies for joining us for this SMART digital workshop. It's a monthly series that will continue next month as well with a brand new guest and same co-facilitators. We're really excited to be sharing this with everyone. And so our next steps for this session is, after this session closes, we'll be editing this video, and we'll be able to share that with you and all of your networks. So stay tuned for that. And we look forward to having the next conversation with our next guest next month.